January 30th, 2026. The United States Department of Justice releases 3.5 million pages of documents, over 2,000 videos, 180,000 images, the largest document dump in DOJ history, phone records, FBI emails, prison surveillance footage, and the official timeline of what happened during the 8 hours no one was watching Jeffrey Epstein. August 10th, 2019, 6:30 a.m., Metropolitan Correctional Center, New York. 2 federal prison guards walk to cell H01001L to deliver breakfast. Jeffrey Epstein doesn't respond. They open the door. Epstein is hanging from the top bunk with an orange bedsheet tied around his neck. He's been dead for hours. The cameras weren't recording. The required security rounds were never done, and the 2 guards responsible for watching him were asleep at their desk 15 feet away. Jeffrey Epstein was arrested on federal charges of sex trafficking of minors. He faced life in prison. He knew the names of powerful people. He had connections to politicians, billionaires, and foreign intelligence. And according to multiple sources, he was preparing to cooperate with federal investigators. But Epstein never testified. He never named names, because on the night of August 9th, 2019, every single safeguard designed to prevent a federal prisoner from dying under government custody failed simultaneously. Was it negligence? Or was it something more? 7 years later, the government has released the evidence. This is what really happened during the 8 hours no one was watching Jeffrey Epstein. If you want to understand how the highest profile federal prisoner in America died while supposedly under 24-hour surveillance, hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already, because this is the official timeline they just declassified. Back to August 2019. Jeffrey Epstein was a financier with connections to some of the most powerful people in the world. Former presidents, British royalty, tech billionaires, Hollywood executives. But in July 2019, federal prosecutors in New York arrested Epstein on charges that shocked the nation. The charges: conspiracy to commit sex trafficking of minors and sex trafficking of minors by force, fraud, or coercion. According to the federal indictment, between 2002 and 2005, Epstein sexually exploited and abused dozens of minor girls at his residences in Manhattan, New York, and Palm Beach, Florida. The indictment alleged that Epstein created a network where victims would recruit other underage girls. He paid them hundreds of dollars in cash after each encounter. This wasn't Epstein's first arrest. In 2008, he pleaded guilty to state prostitution charges in Florida. Under a controversial non-prosecution agreement, he served just 13 months in a county jail with work release privileges. The deal was orchestrated by then U.S. Attorney Alexander Acosta and kept Epstein's co-conspirators from being charged federally. The agreement was later ruled illegal by a federal judge because prosecutors didn't notify the victims, as required by law. But in 2019, investigative journalist Julie K. Brown of the Miami Herald published a series exposing the 2008 deal and identifying new victims. Federal prosecutors reopened the case. On July 6, 2019, Epstein was arrested at Teterboro Airport in New Jersey after returning from Paris. He was denied bail and sent to the Metropolitan Correctional Center in Manhattan to await trial. Epstein's case wasn't just about him. Prosecutors believed he had information about other individuals involved in the alleged trafficking network. His longtime associate, Delane Maxwell, was later arrested and convicted in 2021 for recruiting and grooming minor girls for Epstein. But there were others. Flight logs, photos, witness statements. Epstein knew names and a courting. July 23, 2019, 1:27 a.m. Just 17 days after his arrest, Jeffrey Epstein was found in his cell at MCC with a piece of orange fabric around his neck. His cellmate, former police officer Nicholas Tartaglione, who was facing the death penalty for 4 murders, immediately alerted guards. Epstein was semi-conscious. Marks on his neck indicated possible strangulation or hanging. The official investigation into this incident was inconclusive. Epstein's cellmate said Epstein tried to hang himself. Epstein initially told guards that Tartaglione attacked him. Later, Epstein said he didn't remember what happened. Prison psychologists interviewed him. Epstein denied having suicidal thoughts. He said he was looking forward to the future and his legal defense. Despite the suspicious circumstances, Epstein was placed on suicide watch for just one day. On July 24th, after psychological evaluations, he was removed from suicide watch and returned to general population. But prison psychologists made a critical recommendation. Epstein must have an appropriate cellmate at all times. This was supposed to be a safeguard, someone to watch him, someone who could alert guards if something went wrong. For 2 weeks, Epstein shared a cell with Tartaglione, but on July 30th, the psychology department reiterated the order. Epstein needed a suitable cellmate. Prison officials knew this. They had it in writing. But on August 9th, 2019, that order was ignored. August 8th, 2019, 12:30 p.m., Jeffrey Epstein met with his attorneys for 4 hours. During that meeting, Epstein signed a new last will and testament. He transferred over $577 million in assets into a trust. Prison officials were unaware he had done this. His lawyers never disclosed it to MCC. August 9th, 2019. Morning. Epstein's cellmate, Nicholas Tartaglione, was transferred to another facility. Prison staff had been notified days earlier via email that this transfer was happening. They knew Epstein would be left alone. But despite the psychology department's explicit order that Epstein must have a cellmate, no replacement was assigned. Epstein was placed in cell H01-001L by himself. That afternoon, Epstein met again with his attorneys. Witnesses later said he appeared upbeat and engaged. He discussed legal strategies. He reviewed discovery documents. There were no outward signs of suicidal ideation. 8 p.m. Jeffrey Epstein made a phone call. But this wasn't a normal monitored call. A lieutenant on duty allowed Epstein to use an unmonitored, unrecorded telephone line in violation of prison policy. Epstein told staff he was calling his mother, but Epstein's mother had been dead for 15 years. The call was actually to an unknown person with whom Epstein had a personal relationship. The content of that call was never recorded. The identity of the person he called was never disclosed publicly. 9 p.m. Epstein was locked in his cell for the night, alone. He had an excessive amount of bedding, multiple sheets, blankets, and the orange fabric strips that would later be tied into a noose. Prison policy required that excess bedding be removed from inmates on psychological watch. It wasn't. 10:40 p.m. The last documented security check of Epstein's tier. After this, no prison guard physically checked on Epstein for the next 8 hours. What happened between 10:40 p.m. on August 9th and 6:30 a.m. on August 10th is the central question of this case. According to federal prison regulations, inmates in the special housing unit where Epstein was held must be visually checked by guards every 30 minutes. That means there should have been 16 documented security checks during those 8 hours. There were 0. The 2 guards assigned to watch Epstein's unit that night were Tova Noel and Michael Thomas. Noel was a relatively new officer. Thomas was working mandatory overtime. He had already worked 24 hours straight, 3 consecutive shifts. He was exhausted. Prison policy required Noel and Thomas to walk the unit, visually confirm each inmate was alive and accounted for, and sign official log sheets documenting the checks. They didn't do any of this. Instead, they falsified the records. They signed documents certifying they had completed security rounds at 12 a.m., 3 a.m., and 5 a.m. on August 10th. But surveillance video from the guard station proved they never left their desks. What were they doing? According to the Department of Justice Inspector General's report, published in 2023, security camera footage showed Noel and Thomas sitting at their desk just 15 feet from Epstein's cell. Noel browsed online shopping sites. Thomas looked up sports scores and motorcycle sales. Both appeared to sleep for extended periods. At no point during the critical 8 hours did either guard walk to Epstein's cell. Meanwhile, the prison's video surveillance system was failing. The Metropolitan Correctional Center had a known documented problem with its cameras. On July 29, 2019, just days before Epstein's death, The hard drive for DVR2, which recorded cameras in Epstein's housing unit, failed completely. Although the cameras were still transmitting live video, they were no longer recording. The one camera that was still recording, positioned in the common area of the unit, captured something critical. Between 10:40, August 10th, 2019, 6:30 a.m., Tova Noel and Michael Thomas prepared to deliver breakfast to the inmates. They walked to Epstein's cell. No response. Thomas unlocked the door. Jeffrey Epstein was hanging from the top bunk. An orange bedsheet was tied to the metal frame of the bed and looped around his neck. Epstein was in a semi-seated position, suspended barely an inch and a half off the floor. His body was cold. He had been dead for hours. Thomas cut the fabric. Epstein fell to the floor. Noel and Thomas attempted CPR. Other staff arrived. Paramedics transported Epstein to New York Downtown Hospital. He was pronounced dead at 7:36 a.m. The autopsy was conducted by Dr. Barbara Sampson, Chief Medical Examiner of New York City. The cause of death? Suicide by hanging. Epstein had multiple fractures in his neck, including the hyoid bone, which is sometimes but not always broken in hangings. Some forensic pathologists noted these injuries could also occur in strangulation homicides. Dr. Michael Baden, a private pathologist hired by Epstein's family, attended the autopsy and raised questions about the findings. But the official autopsy, toxicology, and FBI investigation all concluded the same thing. Jeffrey Epstein died by suicide. There were no drugs or alcohol in his system. No signs of a struggle, no defensive wounds. The position of his body, the ligature marks, and the physical evidence at the scene were all consistent with self-inflicted hanging. The question wasn't whether Epstein killed himself. The question was how he was able to do it under supposed 24-hour federal surveillance. The Department of Justice Office of the Inspector General spent years investigating Epstein's death. In June 2030, they released a 300-page report documenting catastrophic failures at every level of the Bureau of Prisons. Failure number 1. The guards falsified records. Noel and Thomas were criminally charged with conspiracy and making false records. They signed documents claiming they had checked on Epstein 16 times. They checked 0 times. The charges were later dismissed after both completed deferred prosecution agreements and community service. Failure number 2. Epstein was left without a cellmate in direct violation of the psychology department's written order. Prison officials knew the cellmate was leaving. They had advance notice. They did nothing. Failure number 3. The surveillance cameras were not recording. The prison had known about the DVR2 hard drive failure for nearly 2 weeks. It was never fixed. The one functioning camera proved no one entered Epstein's cell, but it couldn't show what happened inside. Failure number 4. Chronic understaffing and mandatory overtime. Michael Thomas had worked 24 hours straight. He was physically incapable of staying alert. The Bureau of Prisons was so short-staffed that non-security personnel were being assigned to guard duty. Failure number 5. Excessive bedding was not removed. Epstein had the materials necessary to fashion a ligature and hang himself. These materials should have been confiscated. The Inspector General concluded that Epstein's death was the result of multiple widespread failures by MCC staff and Bureau of Prisons management, but they found no evidence of criminal misconduct beyond the falsified records. November 19, 2025. President Donald Trump signed the Epstein Files Transparency Act into law. The legislation ordered the Department of Justice to produce and publicly release all documents, videos, images, and records related to the investigations of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. January 30th, 2026. The DOJ complied. They released approximately 3.5 million pages of material. This included over 2,000 videos and 180,000 images recovered from Epstein's properties in New York, Florida, New Mexico, Paris, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. The files included FBI emails, summaries of victim interviews, flight logs, phone records, and decades of investigative material. The releases were heavily redacted. All personally identifiable information about victims was removed. In videos and images, Female faces were blurred or obscured to protect their identities. Only Ghislaine Maxwell, who was convicted and is currently serving a 20-year sentence, was not redacted. Some of the content was sexually explicit. The DOJ required age verification to access this material online. Much of it was commercial pornography, but some appeared to have been filmed by Epstein or his associates. What wasn't in the files? The DOJ confirmed there was no secret client list of men being hidden by the government. They stated explicitly if evidence existed to prosecute others, they would do so. Some material was withheld to protect ongoing federal investigations, but nothing was withheld for reasons of national security or foreign policy. So what died with Jeffrey Epstein on August 10, 2019? The answer is information. Epstein knew names. He had connections to powerful people across politics, business, and entertainment. He potentially had evidence that could have implicated others in criminal activity, but he never testified. He never cooperated. And the investigation into his associates was left incomplete. The DOJ has prosecuted Ghislaine Maxwell. She's serving 20 years. But questions remain. Who else knew? Who else participated? The 3.5 million pages released in 2026 provide the most transparency in U.S. history for a case like this. But they also confirm what investigators found in 2019. Jeffrey Epstein died by suicide because federal prison guards were asleep, cameras weren't recording, and institutional failures at every level created the perfect conditions for him to succeed. Was it negligence? Absolutely. Was it a conspiracy? The evidence says no, but the damage was done.
Everybody's going to get in trouble. It's a question of how do you get out of trouble. And I did it by working smart. More importantly than anything else is by using my own brain. You know, I've done things, but I'm not in any trouble, and I'm doing well, and I'm making money.
Well, you're making the same mistake.
Subscribe and turn notifications on. Drop a comment. Do you believe this was pure negligence, or was there more to it? Share your city. Share your thoughts, because the truth is in the official documents now, and it's up to you to decide what it means. Thank you for watching, and remember, history doesn't repeat, but it sure as hell rhymes.